My name is Emily Johnson, and if someone had told me a year ago that one of the most profound and unforgettable experiences of my life would come from traveling across the countryside with a donkey, I probably would have laughed. I grew up in a small town in Ohio where farm animals were part of everyday life, but I had never really paid attention to donkeys before. Horses had always taken the spotlight. Donkeys, I thought, were stubborn, loud, and just background creatures on farms. That all changed when I met Jasper, the donkey who would become my traveling companion and my unlikely hero. It all began on a crisp spring morning. I had just gone through a difficult stretch in my personal life. I had left a job in the city that had drained me of joy, and I was struggling to find direction. My parents had a friend who ran a small rescue ranch just outside of town, and she invited me to visit, sensing I needed a break. That's where I first laid eyes on Jasper. He stood alone near a fence, his shaggy gray coat catching the sunlight, his big brown eyes watching me curiously. Something about the way he looked at me, patient, almost wise, made me stop in my tracks. "Would you like to meet him?" the ranch owner, Martha, asked. I nodded, and she led me over. Jasper brayed softly, a sound that felt both comical and endearing. When I reached out my hand, he sniffed me cautiously and then pressed his nose gently against my palm. It was such a simple gesture, yet it filled me with unexpected warmth. I didn't know it then, but Jasper and I were about to set out on a journey that would heal my heart and teach me lessons about life I could never have imagined. The idea for the journey came a few weeks later. I had been volunteering at the ranch, helping care for the animals, and Jasper had become my constant shadow. Whether I was carrying hay or scrubbing water troughs, he followed me around with his steady gait, never in a rush, never demanding. One evening, as I brushed his mane under the fading orange glow of the sunset, I confessed to him, "I don't know what to do with my life anymore." Of course, he couldn't answer, but his calm presence somehow felt like a reply. That night, I dreamed of walking down a long winding trail with Jasper beside me, mountains rising in the distance, the wind fresh and free. When I woke, I couldn't shake the image. That's when I decided Jasper and I would take a journey together. At first, the idea sounded absurd, even to me. Who takes a donkey on a long trip? But the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. Jasper was strong, steady, and unlike a horse, he didn't spook easily. He could carry supplies, and more importantly, he seemed to understand me in a way no human did at the time. I wanted to test myself, to step away from everything I knew and rediscover life in the slow rhythm of nature. And Jasper would be my partner in that adventure. Preparation took weeks. I studied maps, gathered camping gear, and trained Jasper to carry saddlebags. He learned quickly, with only the occasional stubborn refusal that made me laugh more than frustrate me. I practiced walking long distances with him, and we slowly built our endurance. My parents were supportive, but worried. "Emily, are you sure about this?" my mom asked one night. "What if something happens out there?" "I don't know what's going to happen," I admitted, "but that's the point. I need to find myself again. And I think Jasper is part of that." So one bright June morning, with the sky painted in hues of pink and gold, Jasper and I set off. I packed only the essentials: food, water, a tent, journals, and a camera to capture moments along the way. As we walked down the dirt road leading away from the ranch, I felt both nervous and exhilarated. Jasper plodded along faithfully, ears flicking, as if he knew this was the beginning of something extraordinary. The first days were simple. We followed back roads and trails that led us through rolling fields of wildflowers and along sparkling creeks. At night, I set up camp beneath the stars, Jasper grazing quietly nearby. I would sit by the fire, journal in hand, and reflect on the peace that was settling into me. The world felt slower, kinder, when measured by Jasper's pace. One afternoon, we reached a small town. People stopped and stared as we walked down Main Street, my donkey carrying supplies like some old-time traveler. Children laughed and ran up to pet Jasper, and he tolerated the attention with quiet dignity. An older man sitting outside the general store tipped his hat and said, "Now that's something you don't see every day." "Where are you headed?" "Honestly, I'm not sure, I replied with a smile. Just wherever the trail takes us. He chuckled. Well, you've got yourself a fine companion. Donkeys may not be flashy, but they'll get you where you need to go.
His words stuck with me.
Over the next weeks, Jasper and I faced challenges. There were days when the rain poured down, drenching us both and turning trails into mud. There were steep hills that tested my endurance and moments when I felt doubt creep in. But every time I faltered, Jasper's steady presence grounded me. He never rushed, never complained. He just kept moving forward. And because of him, so did I. One of the most memorable parts of our journey came when we reached the foothills of the Appalachians. The trails grew rugged, winding through dense forests and rocky paths. At times, I wondered if I had made a mistake bringing Jasper into such terrain. But he surprised me with his agility, carefully picking his steps and proving more sure-footed than I could have imagined. At night, the forest came alive with the sounds of crickets and owls. I would lie in my tent, listening to Jasper munching on grass outside, and feel a sense of safety I hadn't known in months. Along the way, we met strangers who became friends. A family who invited us to share a meal when they saw us passing through. A group of hikers who were amazed at Jasper's calmness and strength. A young girl who hugged Jasper tightly and whispered, "You're the cutest donkey I've ever seen." Each encounter reminded me that kindness still existed in abundance in the world, if only I slowed down long enough to notice. The weeks turned into months, and somewhere in the rhythm of walking, camping, and trusting Jasper, I found myself healing. The pain I carried from my past no longer felt as heavy. Instead, I felt strong, capable, and alive in a way I hadn't in years. Jasper became more than just a traveling companion. He was my anchor, my friend, my teacher. One evening, after climbing a ridge that overlooked a valley bathed in the golden light of sunset, I stood beside Jasper and whispered, "We did it, boy. We made it this far." He nudged me gently, and I laughed through tears. It wasn't about the miles we had covered or the mountains we had crossed. It was about the journey inside me, the rediscovery of hope, trust, and joy. When we finally returned home months later, we were both different. I was no longer the lost, uncertain woman who had left with trembling steps. I was stronger, clearer, and deeply grateful.
And Jasper?
He was celebrated like a hero. Children in town called him the adventure donkey, and neighbors often stopped by just to see him. But for me, he would always be more than that. He was the companion who walked beside me when I needed it most, who carried not just my supplies, but also my burdens. To this day, whenever I feel doubt creeping in, I think back to that journey. To Jasper's steady steps, his calm eyes,